Hello, welcome again to another podcast episode on Talk Architecture. Today's word is
Amalgamation.
amalgamation. The amalgamation between architecture education and architectural practice. Now, how do we do that? How do we do a combination or a union of both? Not just either or, but both. Isn't architecture practice and education a combination of theory and practice, of theory and application? Well, yes and no, really. When you learn about theory, automatically you feel application, or you feel how to apply the theory. And when you talk about practice, you thought about the principles behind it, or the theoretical concepts. There are one and both. There are together as one, but separate. Because we tend to analyze. We tend to want to see things like two sides of a coin, really. We don't want to just accept it together. But why is it like that? Because in practice, or whenever there is conflicts in the workplace or in the architectural studio where you're doing your architecture course, this, at a certain level, this argument or this debate or this juxtaposition of education and practice happens, because that doesn't work when a tutor look at your work. It doesn't solve the problem. What design problem are you thinking of? So often tutors, or quite a number that I've met, talk about synthesis, talk about the big idea, talk about what is it you really want to do, your design intention. And then when you talk about that, they will argue again, does it work? So it's always this chicken and egg situation that's happening, either in education or in practice. In practice, someone will say, go back to first principles when you do your drawing, because it doesn't make sense, or there's something missing, a line is missing, or I can't really see it, it's not clear. But when it's clear, then you say, I get it, I feel it. And nobody has to say anything, because they saw in the drawing everything that is needed to be felt, both in terms of the theory and the practical. But how often does that happen? So we break them up again into two sides. It is often the case with skills and knowledge in architecture. There's not enough skills, or there's not enough knowledge. There is a lack of something or another in the drawings. There seems to be something missing. And I don't have a feel for the architecture. It's like as if you are being too pedantic, or you're being too, shall we say, academic. What is wrong being academic? I could understand that questioning, because then at the other hand, when you're doing research, people will say, this is not scholarly enough. This is not academic writing. This is too talking off the cuff. This is like a conversation. We cannot accept that sort of research. But in your heart, you think, why not, Why does there have to be a comment all the time? Is it for the sake of commenting? Was architecture education about all that you have experienced before? Was it all about egos? Egos meaning that people have to say something because they're in the spot, really. I mean, during that crit, people are watching them or waiting for them to say something, to gestulate something. We used to have tutors that rip to shreds the drawings, and that says more than what is needed. Obviously, it is almost like a violent act. I've heard of that, and I never actually witnessed it, and I would be very devastated if that happened, especially if I did work on it and I thought that work was presentable or there is some credibility to what I've done. I may be naive, but I cannot imagine that someone would rip to shreds or just tear up the piece of paper. I mean, I could be traumatized, obviously, if that happened. At that time, as a lecturer, when I was a younger lecturer, I was like, oh, wow, I wish I could do that, but I can't. It's just now I know why. Amalgamation of education and practice. Is it a hybrid? Is it something that is contrived? Education should be education and students explore whatever creativity they need to explore. And in practice, it should be practice, a proper practice with understanding of contracts and laws and doing a business. Now, business is not such a difficult thing to grasp. When I come to think of it, when I'm actually learning sales and marketing, I feel that it's quite a natural thing to do so. It is like, people say selling your idea or your concept should be one of those things that students need to be able to do, yes. But it's more than that, really. It's the whole idea of being entrepreneurial. Excuse me if I don't say it correctly, but the amalgamation, there's a lot of big words here, amalgamation of education and practice. It's not two things combined, but two sides of a coin, and that's to do with the coin, the value of the coin, the value of knowledge in architecture. The value, when I strip it down to just the value of architecture, meaning that you seek to find the knowledge and skills in practicing architecture. The value of architecture, at the age of 17 or 18, you had in mind to be an architect. But suddenly, as you develop and go into young adulthood, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, I don't really want to do architecture, but I learned a lot from architecture. I actually learned a lot of stuff. I'm actually more confident to do something. I feel that I can sell something. I feel that I'm good, I'm skillful at this. And if I could develop this and I could test it out there, it's not only making money, but it's like I can create a community. I can be part of a community and see where it goes from there. I could understand that because people are confident. At the age of 22, 23, 24, they explore 25 and so on. Sometime later, when they started, like a decade after they started, then they got some sort of traction, some sort of a way forward. For those who want to do architecture the traditional way, because out of all that, there could be the entrepreneur, there could be someone who's going to be a project manager or something associated with architecture, but not really architecture, and there could be the traditional architect. But we try to go and talk to these people. Like I talk about how that tutor tore up somebody's drawing. Maybe that is a good way, but it's traumatizing, but I don't think it's a good way at all. But I could imagine if I was that person, I wouldn't want to do traditional architecture. After that, I would be doing something else, but it would lead me a better path. I don't know, but it could. I mean, I have had situations before where I had to resign from something and it affected me that I couldn't compete. But somehow I found out why, the reason why I needed to go in a certain direction as a young person, even in my 30s. Amalgamation of what? Architecture, education, and practice. Oh, it's just architecture. There's a theory and there's a practical side of it. And it's an applied art, so applied technology and applied science, whichever you want to have it, in which you could be a product designer, you could be an artist, you could be a filmmaker, you could be doing fashion design, other design-related works, graphic designer. But there is always that edge, where you need to sell it. There's that edge where if you're an entrepreneur, whatever you learn in architectural school, you go somewhere because you'll be mastering something, mastering to draw, mastering to illustrate, mastering to edit well or produce or direct or manage, able to have that eye to actually see the brand or the logo, or able to manage a lot of people, a team, able to have all those other skills to organize, to manage, and to actually produce something. But you know that you need some theory and you can't just do practice. That theory part in architecture, shall we say, something to talk, something to converse, something that you can communicate with others. Because there needs to be a common language. A common language to talk about design, colors, theory of color, or theory of architectural styles of the modern era, or historical styles, classical. What is classical? You'd be left behind, isn't it, if you don't understand what classical architecture is. If you want to go into it deeper, you could be an art historian. But if you want to have a conversation, you could actually understand, shall we say, the proportion system, the ratios, Palladian, Inigo Jones, the Renaissance architects. That's in the Western configuration, obviously. You could learn about tatami mats, Islamic architecture, ancient architecture, antiquities, Chinese architecture, Japanese, Indian. So many types of architecture. And I'm sure there's so much from the Americas, from Africa. So much to learn. And if you have an eye for design, because you understand proportion systems, you understand a bit more about construction and materials, you understand a bit more about anthropology or cultural systems. Those are things that have been introduced to you in architecture school. And they're not going to go into it so deeply. You might have done an assignment on it and could have gone into it deeply. Any subject at all, which takes your interest. Education is something that could happen face to face in a group situation where you have a classroom, studios, you learn together as a group teaching or collaboration, or you could do it individually, even online courses, and then you do your practical training or your understanding through practice, and you could actually be an entrepreneur after that. You could broadcast so that much more of this knowledge is available to others. And when you broadcast using podcasts or writings, publications, your work itself, other people may take interest. There could be more conversation and dialogue regarding your work. And out there, this time, social media. And social media is one thing. To be able to tease others to be interested in your work. Another thing is to be having a forum or a seminar and webinar and so on to get people to be interested in your work. And to be not so conscious or not so, shall we say, salesman-like or direct selling or some sort of, shall we say, there's a lot of scamming going on, right? So don't want yourself to be thought of as a scammer or being doubted your intentions as if you're looking for the kill or the business. But there is a psychology in that, and how do you actually sell yourself as a business person? As a traditional architect or as a entrepreneur? For an entrepreneur, is the system thinking behind it is that you work in collaboration with others and you get the job through the recommendation of others, or you get the job through a system that has been created that eventually you get the job. As a direct marketing business person, you would just advertise it directly, either through calling people or through emailing. Of course, the direct marketing, if it done automatically or with automation, the clients will be interested immediately rather than they think too much about it. But then again, you could be an entrepreneur as well doing that. So these are just words, really. So I'm getting back into education and the importance of architectural education and how the curriculum is set about to actually understand, to actually create a curriculum that addresses all these concerns in the 21st century. Architecture disrupted. Now, a lot of people are holding on to the whole idea of architecture education. They don't want architecture to be disrupted because business have been made. through university courses and the traditional way, and the accreditation processes of the professional bodies establish institutions will not be making money if people decided not to refer to them anymore. So architecture disruption is what I call something that is going to happen anyway, regardless of whether I'm talking to you right now about it. Architecture will be disrupted. It's best to set about thinking about this in a better way rather than just holding on to the old ideas. It's going to happen anyway. Because I'm one of those who are really into architectural education all 5 years. And now I'm thinking you can do it in 3 years. Because you can be that person who's able to master everything and even go leaps and bounds in practice, in working life, without having to go through that 2 years. But nobody's going to give you the money if you don't do your master's. But what's the difference between, well, in my country, maybe 1,000 ringgit difference. But people will argue with me. Rather than you get 3,000, now you get 4,000 as a basic pay. How is that? Losing a couple of years. Losing a couple of years is a big deal in this day and age because you could actually train yourself to do business and sales and marketing. I mean, some people have figured that out. And they go about being confident about it. All you need is to have a lot more confidence in talking to people, in having conversations, and being out there. There will be a situation where people are not interested anymore because that's the way it is. The market demands will change. It is not really clear anymore unless you do bungalows and villas and houses. Apart from that, everything has to do with a developer, at least in my country. And I bet it's the same in many countries where the developers call the shots. The market demands, meaning the developer can take in people who are 3 years in architecture course. And the problem is because of the positions that people try to protect themselves. But eventually things will be found out. It's a matter of years in this decade. Why I'm saying this is because of the common sense of it all. If you are listening to me right now, still listening to me, it's the common sense of it all that you can do everything in a 3-year course, not a 5-year course. And the only reason that I'm so confident is because the professional practice part, you can do it with a 2-year practical training after the 3 years course. The laws and contracts and so on. The principles you can do in the 3 years beginning. And the case studies and all sorts of exposure, workshop seminars, and drawing capabilities, and thinking capabilities, you could do in the first 3 years. And you can catch up with all sorts of software nowadays. The softwares is going to be right around the corner where AI will take over to speed up the process. Will take over the softwares that are the bread and butter, you know what I mean, the Revits and all this, the specification, the all those things that is needed before to be taught by human beings, but it's repetitive in nature. That is just around the corner. So what is the value that a human being or the architect have to this whole process? It's the ability to control our environment, what will emerge. You don't need AI yet, and you can see the repetitiveness and stuff coming out there that has been designed, which is kind of banal, kind of repetitive, kind of ubiquitous, and it's just putting like collages of things. You can even see that automated without AI. What more later? So what can you control? You can control the value that you're going to create, the volume, space, and details. You can control that which AI can't control. You can control collaboration, human-to-human collaboration. You can control dialogue and conversations of how architecture could be a much more interesting, valuable profession that could help shape the world. You can control that, and which AI cannot control. Innovation or innovative things. Other things, it's just ticking boxes in which computerization is going to take the better of you. So this is a deliberation on the new architecture curriculum. How do you know when to use the computer, and how do you know when to use your mind? We all know that design and the thinking part and the innovation part, the origination part comes from the mind, and everything else, the repetitiveness, the, shall we say, duplications or drawing out can be done fast with a computer. We all know that. But do other people who collaborate us know that? Will we be able to advise other people better? I mean, we've made mistakes before AI. We made mistakes before computerization. What could be guaranteed in the future where we don't make those mistakes again? It could only get better with computerization, but it could go out of hand. So with this post, or shall we say podcast episode, I leave you with the idea of the new curriculum, the potential of the new curriculum. I have questioned a lot about Masters of Architecture because there's a lot of repetitive work there in which there's nothing new that you can learn. And you can, if you really want it, you can have 4 years, but still 3 years is doable. And you'd want the bright minds to come and study architecture. A lot of bright minds, the young minds, to study architecture and come out with confidence. That's all it is about.